Welcome to For the Greater Good, a podcast brought to you by the Independent Grocers Alliance. And now your host, John Ross.
Well, hello, IGA family. It's John Ross here, and this is another episode of my personal podcast, which is For the Greater Good. And the whole point of this is to talk with industry executives, leaders who have made a decision on behalf of their companies to try to make our world a better place for our children and our grandchildren. And of course, we're talking about sustainability issues. Today, my special guest is the CEO of Coca-Cola, James Quincey. James, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, John.
Well, I think it's going to be an easy conversation today because I know Coca-Cola is committed to this, but not everyone watching knows you, sits on a board with you, knows you as well as I do. So why don't you do a quick introduction, something about your background and kind of how you got to the job that you have, and maybe something personal that people wouldn't know.
Sure. Well, I'm obviously, from my accent, or perhaps not quite as obviously, I'm British, born in London, born in the UK. I grew up there, and eventually, because I was good at sciences, I actually ended up doing electronic engineering at university, which was kind of on the front edge in the 80s when I did it. But I found that I actually enjoyed business more than designing semiconductors. Went on, left university, went in consulting for just over 10 years until 96. I was enticed to the Coca-Cola company, and I've been there ever since, and working up through a series of jobs, running operations all around the world, and finally, just over 5 years ago, taking over as chief executive of this fantastic company. And when I do get the odd spare minute, and it's not easy in Atlanta, I love to go skiing because it's not that cold there. But other than that, great to be with you.
Yeah, not a lot of good skiing within a drive of our houses. So I live in Atlanta as well. So I think it's interesting. For people tend to get isolated. They either have domestic jobs or they have global jobs. And these global jobs, they give you this really cool perspective. IGA with 6,500 stores now, almost 6,500 stores worldwide. You go to these different communities and you're able to see through the lens of the folks that work there and to serve customers every day. You can see both how common and how different our world can be. And it really brings into sharp relief some of the issues that we're going to talk about today, sustainability, because whatever issue we're talking about here, you can probably find a country someplace else which has those problems, even greater. So I think I'm very interested, and I think the audience will be very interested about your role both in CGF and your role as a CEO at Coca-Cola, setting objectives for sustainability. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about both.
Sure. Perhaps let me start with Coca-Cola and then go on to CGF and say a little about how we see the two connecting. Very simply, our overarching philosophy is it's very difficult in the long run to have a sustainable business, a valuable business, without a sustainable and healthy community in which that business is based. And so we see very much the need to engage on a whole set of issues to ensure the long-term viability of the business and of the communities. And some of those obvious examples are in the sustainability field, and in the case of Coca-Cola, self-evidently things like water and packaging, to take a couple of them. And so at Coke, we're very much of the thought, if we want to be able to have a diverse packaging portfolio well into the future, we need to be able to address the societal issues we know are out there, whether it's to do with waste, packaging that gets thrown away that ends up in the wrong where it shouldn't, and then the use of new raw materials of whatever sort, aluminium, plastic, PET, and the energy associated with that. And actually two things come together, and we launched a program called World Without Waste, which is about generating a circular economy on packaging, basically getting back a bottle or can for every one we sell, and then making sure they're recycled, and we set ourselves a goal of the amount we were going to use ourselves. So it's core to our business, and it's also critically important from a societal point of view. So there are a set of areas in sustainability which we believe our actions, although not necessarily driving the business in the short term, are critical for long-term license to operate well into the future, and they're great for society. And I think that ladders in and connects to how we see CGF, the Consumer Goods Forum, how we play our role there. And at the moment, I'm co-chair with Daniel Zhang from Alibaba of the CGF. And very much there, this is a collection of over 400 businesses, 400 forum members who are trying to work collectively to make sure we can collectively talk about sustainable business in sustainable communities. And so very much at the moment, the membership is focused on a set of priority areas broader than just the two I talked about for Coca-Cola, but including those. And we're focused on how can we share and set best practices around the world in pre-competitive areas so that we can make a real difference, because the Coca-Cola company can do something on its own, but acting in an ecosystem, acting with our peer manufacturers and peer retailers, engaging with civil society and government, we can truly make impact at scale. And so we see the CGF both as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to see impact at a much greater scale than any one individual can hope to achieve. And in the end, from a societal point of view, solving some of these important and profound problems can only be achieved by collective action across industry, across government, across society. And so CGF provides a forum for that to be able to happen.
Well, I'm a proud board member alongside you, and there are multiple pillars within that organization, and reducing plastic waste in the oceans would be an example of one, or making sure that we end child labor and slave labor worldwide, and which is an issue both internationally and actually domestically. And so there's a lot of pillars on that. Not every company is involved in all pillars, but the companies bring their expertise to those pillars, and that's what makes that organization so precious. But it also gives me hope for the future. James, if I think about, if I were to visit your offices there in Atlanta, you've got brilliant people working on 2 and 3 generation ahead technology. And if you think about our industry and the innovation that allows us to have a global supply chain and be able to get fresh blueberries to Bush, Alaska every single day, and all the crazy things that we're able to do, and the innovation in packaging and the innovation in product quality, and the productivity of farming. The American farm today is 5 times more productive than it used to be. And so you think about that science, and if you picked up those people, you just shift them a little bit and focus them on these issues about how do we make sure what we do lasts and improves the world, in ways that about what we're talking about. I am very optimistic for the future. And Coca-Cola has a reputation of being a highly innovative company on that front. Is there news specifically in your company that you wanted to talk about today? If you had a bunch of retailers in front of you and you wanted to say, hey, be proud of Coca-Cola because we're working on, or we're doing this thing right now, what would be the top thing you'd say?
Yeah, let me jump into examples, but perhaps do a segue to your point, which is, for those who are interested in all the different coalitions of action of the Consumer Goods Forum, they have a website. It's very easy to find information, and anyone that wants to participate in those coalitions, and they cover a broad range of issues, and you named a few more of them, please do go and connect with CGF. This is a lot of important stuff, and there's a lot of ways to interact there. So let me go back to the question of innovations at Coca-Cola. As you say, we have been at the forefront of trying to innovate. Ultimately, we need to innovate because we need impact at huge scale across our global business system. And if I just kind of focus in on packaging again, and just think about some of the new things that are coming and some of the things we've done that all, when you add them all up, start to make a difference. We've put out a new last year 100% plant-based plastic bottle. So instead of using virgin fossil fuel, we've used essentially waste plant material and able to convert that into new plastic. Then we've also looked at innovation, say, okay, but if we want to be able to recycle a bottle, sometimes in some countries, recycling the label on the bottle is harder than recycling the bottle. Can we find innovations where we can launch label-less bottles? And so, last year in Japan and then South Korea and now into Hong Kong and mainland China, we've managed to, obviously work with the technology to have a label-less bottle, but also work with the regulation so that we're allowed to sell a label-less bottle. So the information that the consumer needs is contained on the cap. And so here you see the intersection of innovation, both from a packaging and a manufacturing point of view, but also the regulatory innovation that's necessary in order to support all this change. And there are other regulatory innovations that have been necessary. There are still countries where food grade recycled PET, back from bottle to bottle essentially, is still not allowed on the regulation because they haven't got to that stage yet. So marrying the manufacturing innovation with the regulatory innovation is important. Another simple example. We're a marketing company. We've proudly celebrated the Sprite, our clear brand, lemon lime brand, fantastic. But we've used a green bottle forever and a day. The reality of recycling is the green bottles are harder to recycle, and they kind of need to be separated out. And so that's a complication for the recycling infrastructure, the ecosystem. So at the end of last year, we started pushing out across a whole set of markets, almost 50 markets last year, another 70 coming this year, including the US, where we're going to switch Sprite from its historic green bottle and its green identity into a clear bottle, because that way we can actually make recycling much easier. So there you see an example where, in a way, it's not a new technical innovation, but in order to facilitate and prioritize driving a circular economy around packaging, we have to go back to some of the fundamental precepts of marketing and what the brand is and what it stands for. Other areas of innovation, sometimes you don't even see them. I've talked about things you can see. The things you don't see necessarily is lightweighting. The simplest way to save money and to be more sustainable is just to use less material. And if you look at if you think back, I mean, you and I can talk about it, we're of a certain age. Think how thick and sturdy a can was when we were kids.
Yeah.
Now it's like the breadth of a hair, a beverage can on the wall now. So this lightweighting process is tremendously important across the packaging spectrum to basically use less material from the beginning. And in some places, we've been going back to refillable bottles. So even innovating by returning to something that we used to do, going back to the past in a way and using more refillable bottles, big in Latin America in large refillable PET bottles, experimenting with refillable glass bottles in southern Texas. So there we've talked about innovations into the future that you can see, innovations you can't see, innovations that we've brought back from the past, and even in some parts of Europe innovated by having at-home syrups, so like pods for beverages, which haven't been there. But in the end, it's going to take all these innovations and more at scale, and it's going to take the Coca-Cola company to do it, and it's going to take a lot of peer companies and retailers to embrace this so that we can evolve the industry supply chain infrastructure to still give what the consumers want. They still want great brands at great value, but they want it to be more sustainable into the future. And it's going to take the sum of all these innovations, the industries, and with the government support.
James, when you talk about it internally with your leadership team, do you see sustainability as a altruistic, an obligation, sort of a human obligation, or do you see it as a smart investment for a company to improve its competitive stance over the long term?
Well, the reality is both. And as a business leader, it's nice to think it's not just business necessary, but it's actually good for the planet. And the analogy I always use with people, because I grew up in Birmingham, that's Birmingham, England, not Birmingham, Alabama, is I grew up down the road from what in the 70s was the third largest automotive group in the world, which was British Leyland. British Leyland no longer exists. It went out of business a while ago. One of the many problems British Leyland had, British Leyland used to think of quality as a cost center. So they used to make the cars in the factory. They used to poorly. They used to send them to the quality department who try and remake them again. Better, but not complete. And then they'd sell them to you, and you'd have to spend the weekend fixing them. And then someone came along and said, look, we've got this brilliant idea. We'll make quality an inherent part of the product. And then they didn't need an expensive quality department, and the consumer could do something else at the weekend. Surprise, surprise, who won? British Leyland gone. The foreign car manufacturers came in and took over the whole industry. And for me, in a very simple analogy, sustainability is the thing. If you think it's a cost center, That's British Leyland type thinking. It needs to be inherent and a core part of the proposition and the product. And then actually everything will work.
So, James, we have this an audit process where we'll go through a store and we'll look at things that they can do to mostly reduce their energy signature. And you can go in and save, with just 5 or 6 simple things, you can often save $100,000 a year. And it's things like replacing seals on freezers, or it's turning a machine off when you're not using it. It's things like not blocking the vents on the coolers, because when you do that, everything works harder. And these very, very simple things that you can do, and that adds to a store's to-do list, right? In addition to all of the other things you've got to add to those. And that feels like a cost, but of course it pays for itself quickly. But then the next layer up is the things that in many cases we already do. We already recycle packaging, and you can get revenue back on that used packaging, and switching to different kinds of energy. We have a lot of stores that are switching to solar, and that's saving them a lot of money, and switching away from fluorescence to LED lighting. All these tasks that you do in the moment because it's got a short-term cost benefit, but of course the long-term. If we were to cobble together all the things that retailers do now and put it out as kind of a business case, the local retailers are actually amazingly powerful in their ability to make a difference in their community. You mentioned legislation. That's one of them that we've got to work on. Recycling laws are even in the U.S. They vary by community, and the availability of recycling is it's just all over the board. And if we want to make a difference, we're going to have to engage as a group with NGA and FMI and other organizations. Well, hey, I think you did a great job. I know you could probably list another 50 examples of the things that Coca-Cola is doing, and you have a lot to be proud of. My last question for you is this: like, if you're at your retirement party, right? And someone gets up on stage and they're making a speech, and not a roast, but they're saying nice things about you, and they would say, and James left a better world because of what? What would you want them to say?
As you say, it'd be nice if it wasn't a roast. Yeah. I think I want them to say, he inspired us not to just make a difference so far in the journey, but that actually we feel more confident and more capable about reaching further and faster. Because in the end, this is a storied enterprise that's well over 100 years old, and it's got we want it to thrive for hundreds of years into the future. And so it's not just about he helped us solve X, and I hope we do solve and make great progress on packaging and making it a circular economy. But I want them to be really thinking out into the future, into all the other things where we need to set bold visions and take action and make it integral to part of our business. So I want them to be better and to see further than I could ever see, and to do much more than I could ever think of doing.
Well, I think that is a great answer. I'd like to end by saying we'll have links to some of the Coca-Cola sustainability programs, because you've got some great information on your corporate website, and then we'll do also the link to the CGF for the different pillars for the retailers or the wholesalers or manufacturers who watch this. And with that, I will say, James, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I'll see you at the next board meeting, and goodbye, IG family.
Thanks, John. Great to talk to you.